Experts are constantly telling us that artificial intelligence is significantly changing our society. But the truth is that it is not always easy to see the so-called radical changes, and some of it is just hype. Even the current sweetheart of artificial intelligence, large language models and generative AI, become less of a marvel the more you use and experience them. Yes, it is nice to ask in everyday words for some summary of a text or a neat image of a fancy chicken, but after a while the mystique wears off. Still, AI is changing our society in some ways, and one of these ways is bringing about industrial-scale surveillance. This means a sharp rise in the surveillance carried out by both private and public organizations to facilitate these AI tools. In this video, I will explain how and why AI is increasing surveillance, why this is different from previous growth in surveillance applications, and why we should care about that. This video is based on a paper of mine, which you can read following the link in the description below. Let's start with why there is this sharp rise. After all, surveillance has been growing steadily since the second half of the 20th century, long before artificial intelligence has become so significant. Indeed, ever since the electronic and digital revolutions, human surveillance has been increasing, and the data gathered about individuals is inflating. The introduction of database, CCTV cameras, cell phone data, digital imaging, and online data all contribute to this inflation, and even before AI became all the rage, we could have labeled our society a surveillance society. One of the uses of this data is sophisticated algorithms, that is, pieces of software that recognize patterns and sometimes predict outcomes. For instance, algorithms that identify patterns in images and turn them into text that can be searched, copied, and pasted. Another example would be algorithms that try to predict a convict's likelihood to reoffend. In the past, these patterns were identified by software developers who went over the data and using direct observations or simple statistics were able to recognize them. Yet the 1990s saw the growing popularity of machine learning software, which allowed the automation of some pattern recognition abilities while achieving better results and much more sophisticated AI models. Moreover, since the early 2000s, we have seen the intensified use of deep learning techniques, which is a step further in the automation process, and lately also the flourishing of large language models and generative AI. Each such move marks an increase in the sophistication of the algorithms and therefore a more sophisticated system that can do more. However, each jump also marks more data required in order to produce the AI model. If simple algorithms require some data, machine learning models require much more, deep learning still more, and large language models require vast amounts of training data. This is where surveillance comes into play. How do we get so much data for AI? Data is produced mainly using surveillance. Surveillance in the large sense of the word. For instance, healthcare surveillance is all data produced in the medical field, your X-rays, your digital medical record, and so on. Even if it's only a picture of a bone, it's still data about humans, which can often be connected to a certain human. So in order to get more data for training the AI, we need more surveillance, more devices that will capture human output and human activity, more digitalization of previous human output, more recordings of our interactions with our environments, other people, devices, and so on. And of course, it's not just data, it's also metadata. When did we interact with an application? What was our smartphone's location at 6 p.m.? And how long was our online doctor consultation? Developers are tapping into existing surveillance streams and creating new ones in order to have enough data for training their AI models. They are also amalgamating existing data into huge repositories. That is, taking data from many sources and either dumping it all into one place or cross-referencing it to enable supervised training. For instance, if I can get all your medical scans, the list of all your medical appointments, the list of medications you have bought using your healthcare provider, and your electronic medical record, and put them all together and connect them all using, let's say, your ID number, I have essentially produced new data about you thanks to the connection of different sources. The bottom line is that data-hungry AI is producing lots of surveillance on a different scale to that of the past. The jump in scale resembles that between pre-industrial manufacturing and industrial manufacturing. In pre-industrial manufacturing, people produce goods in their homes or small workshops. It was a small-scale production with limited output and a humble footprint. The move to the Industrial Revolution meant a move to a large scale. Production in huge factories with hundreds of workers producing vast quantities of outputs from yarns to screws. This shift also was realized in increasing in demand for raw materials. A small bicycle producing workshop would require modest quantities of metal, rubber, steel, cables, and so on. A bicycle factory, on the other hand, would require huge quantities of each material, which it will warehouse and use on demand. Similar to this jump in scale between pre-industrial and industrial manufacturing, there is a current jump in scale due to the creation and training of AI systems. Just as in the Industrial Revolution, this meant a jump in demand for raw materials, today the same jump in demand is at play. Only the raw material is the data about you. For this, they need industrial-scale surveillance, which can only be satisfied by producing more surveillance capabilities and amassing of more and more data. Why should we care? First of all, we are the one providing the raw material for these AI models, and often we are not asked if we would like to contribute our data to these projects. While some projects seem to potentially benefit society, others do not. At the least, we should be asked in advance if we are willing to be surveilled in that way, if our data may be used and for what. Moreover, once a means of surveillance has been created and data is being gathered, both this means and the data may be used for other purposes different from the ones that initiated the surveillance. For instance, if the authorities place street cameras for security reasons, once in place, those same cameras may be later used to detect illegal parking or to catch graffiti tagging. This is what scholars call function creep, and is often the case with surveillance technologies. Therefore, even if you approve of what the data about you is currently being gathered, you will not necessarily approve of what it would be used for in the future. All in all, the jump to industrial-scale surveillance is a significant one and cannot be perceived as a mere continuation of past surveillance. AI has introduced an exponential rise in surveillance, and most of us didn't even notice it.